Previously on the Understanding a Man podcast.
which is basically we're moving into the subdivisions, and white folks were like, "Nah, we don't want them here," and they left those subdivisions.
But here's the
That's the
thing.
thing that happened. That's why, like, even today, like actually yesterday and maybe last week, when the president of the United States, the guy who's in the White House right now, puts on Twitter that suburban
Yes.
women
Yep.
don't be afraid of low-income housing moving into your suburbs. Joe Biden, yes, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, if Joe Biden gets elected, then you have to worry about this element and that element moving in. Don't worry about that because I'm basically not going to let that happen. It's not even thinly veiled in the highest office of the land. So, you talk about like all of these things that have happened over history, like the Fair Housing Act, we're battling that and trying to make those things work. These issues, like Cecil said, they're still there. But just to add to that statement, I don't know if you guys have thought about this, but what we've seen in the past few months with, for example, John Lewis, the death of John Lewis and the death of other people's, it's really what needs to happen is a passing of a torch onto the next generation of leadership.
Right.
It's going to take this to a different level. And what I mean by different level is this, and I might get eggs and tomatoes and apples thrown at me for saying this, but
Okay, it's all right.
we need to think of a different way, and we need to be having a different conversation than
Okay.
we've had in years past. Those things that worked, that got us where we are today, which obviously ain't good enough, right? But they
Right.
did, but incrementally, those things that got us where we are today don't work in today's world. And at some point, we have to change the conversations and have different conversations.
I'm so glad you said that, Fred, because that's really.
This is why I watch my boy Fred Schwarzschild on
And
You
now
know what?
for part 3 of the 3-part
Let me
series.
share this
How
because
you feeling,
I
bro?
want to give just my testimony, and then you guys can just share your piece because Fred, I love that transition. I don't know.
I'ma make a
I'm about
toast
to, like,
because we
remove
still
myself to
alive.
put you here, but you just doing
No
what you
big.
skillfully
I feel
here
like
to do,
Pop.
right?
Shoot a shot.
So
I'm coming in hot.
when it took me a while because I didn't watch the news like talking about it, and so in one day I watched the Aubrey video and I watched Floyd.
Yeah, coming in hot. Just like the fajita.
My
I
stomach
write what I live. My
was
life in the speaker.
it just kept turning, right? And I took the next 3 days off of work because I had to really go into myself. And so during that time, I hadn't seen my son, he's 25 now. And so I hadn't seen him for a couple of days. And I was just like, I called him because I had already talked to my son who's in the house, Avion. But Marcus, I hadn't seen him in a little bit because, working. And I called him to say, son, how do you feel? And he was just like, elevator version of the conversation. He was just basically like, Dad, I'm not going to be out here looting and all that stuff. But what do you really want me to do with my anger? Where am I going to put it? And when he said that, as a parent, you don't want your child to hurt because you're just like, oh, you're hurting. And you have nowhere to put it. And then I'm looking on the news and seeing where people are putting their hurt and just hearing different conversations. And so, I share with him with regard to understanding a man. And one of the pieces that, I fight the fight just a little bit differently because, in order to improve our communities, we need to improve these families. In order to improve these families, we need to improve the individuals. And so in doing that, with individuals like everybody that's on this phone of just working through from a personal development perspective. So if I can be a key piece over there to help people shift their energy a little bit different, that's where I fight the fight, And so to Fred's point, as you shift your energy, Cammie, I want to throw this to you with regard to what are you doing to maybe shift your energy or to, fight the fight outside of just maybe some of the things that they just showed us out there, that we're just doing violently, if you will.
I don't know that I'm necessarily doing that part as well as I would like.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's honest. That's good.
I do have a little bit of a revolutionary you know,
Okay.
part of my DNA that's struggling. I think it was John Lewis where they were, you know, looking back at some of his previous conversations and maybe interviews or what have you. And he said, and I think he said something along the lines of, maybe Fred, you can, you know, quantify the statement. He said, we knew he's talking about the civil rights movement. And, you know, he said we knew that whenever we were going out to march, that some of us weren't coming home. I don't know, Fred. Golly, I don't want to quote, but
I didn't pay attention in social studies, so don't ask
okay.
me.
Let's ascribe it to John Lewis because it's a powerful statement. You know what I mean? But I think he said that when we went out to march and we went out to protest, we knew that some of us weren't coming home. And we were okay with that because we knew that's what it took in order to move things forward and to make progress. And so there's an aspect of like the spirit, I guess to your original question, there's an aspect to the spirit of this entire conversation of racism that I feel like I'm not stepping up to the plate. Because when you're talking about putting your life towards something that matters, they did that. And that's why we talk about them. We talk about those great men because they put it all on the line. They had wives and they had children too. They had aspirations and dreams and things that they wanted to accomplish. But for whatever reason, to them, it was like, you know, I read this quote today and it said that comfort is where dreams go to die. Like when, you know, you give a man, you give him, he said, if you give a man consistent, I don't know if it was like consistent good sex, you know, consistent good sex, good food, and cheap entertainment, his dreams will die. Something along those lines, because comfort is a drug. And that's where, something like that, I have to go find it. But the point I'm making is that I think that there's been this neutralization that's taken place over the last 40 years, maybe 50 years since Dr. King was assassinated, that we, like, life ain't that bad. And so now that it's good enough to where you don't want to lose what you got, you know, it's just, I don't know. I feel like I'm too comfortable. And if I'm going to attack the problem, either attack it or leave it alone.
Yeah,
but to do it halfway is what frustrates me.
Right.
And so so in my dialogue online, and David and I had this conversation about just, you know, man, be bold, be fearless, be strong, be unlocked, right? Say what you got to say. And if it's right, then say it. But even that, I still feel like part of it is just incomplete. And so when you ask me, how do I feel? Like, man, internally, I'm challenged. Because there's nothing that I want to do.
But I think that's okay to say. You know what I'm saying? That if you're still traveling through that moment, I think that's okay to say.
Well, you asked me, I'm gonna tell you. I'm just telling you.
I'm complimenting.
If you wouldn't have asked me, I may not have said it. So I appreciate it. You know, but I just, man, listen. There's a guy named Jack Youngblood. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that football player. He played for the Rams and he played with a broken leg. He played in a game with a broken leg, and he's like a football legend because that's the grittiness of the sport. When Kobe Bryant tore his Achilles and he walked to the free throw line and sank 2 free throws, that's why he's a hero.
Right.
Not because he was good, but because he was the Mamba. He was like, I don't care if you got to wheelchair me to the free throw line, I'm shooting these 2 shots. That's the part I think is missing in leadership, to use Fred's word. It's the passing of the torch of leadership. And it might be where the passing of the torch of the great orators was passed, but not the spirit of the ones that were willing to risk it all for it. You know, there's people that can say what was said and what needs to be said, but how many of them are willing to do what it takes to make it happen in their lifetime?
Or not in their lifetime.
And I want to jump in there.
Or not, or next, or yeah, right. Thank you. That's why, you know, my brothers.
Well, going into what Cammy just said, you know, I believe that there are a bunch of leaders that are out here right now, but they're filtered out by, you know, what you close with. Are you gonna put your life on the line? Because we collected data for years, and that data has shown that Martin Luther King put his life on the line, right? You know, Assata Shakur, she might not be dead, but if she didn't flee over to Cuba, she'd be dead, right?
Right.
Malcolm X, dead. You know,
Right.
everybody who does it ends up dead or in jail. And I'm not
Evers.
saying, I think that's the filter. I think that's the filter where a lot of us are scared. You know, I go back to today's time. I think about where someone like Tupac would have been in his 50s. What type of revolutionary leader would he have been at this point in time, right? If he wasn't killed at that time, I think it would have eventually happened, because every time one of us rises and our voice is way too loud, that's what happens. You know, I hope I'm not jumping ahead, Elam, and if I am,
Cecil.
I know you're going to stop me.
Do what you do.
But when we talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, right? That was immediately branded as a terrorist organization. Whoa, that hashtag is way too powerful. Whoa, what is that? Let us brand this as a terrorist organization. Let's kill it right now, right?
Right.
And
right.
I think that's a metaphor what's happening for, you know, a lot of our leaders. You know, obviously they're being,
Metaphor literally for the Black life.
I'm sorry.
It's a metaphor literally for the Black life.
That's really what it is. And I think that needs to be highlighted for a moment, because I don't think that that's said enough. That's what it is.
Right.
And if you don't know what it feels like to not have what it looks like, not only in the news, but what it also feels like as you're matriculating through life, if anybody feels like that it's a terroristic thing or whatever, no, it's saying that, guess what? It looks like that we don't, we feel that we don't, and let's create this type of dialogue to, you know, just kind of let's move, because let's try to move the ball forward. It's not about standing still and I'm pissed off at you and you pissed off at me. How can we move it forward? But before we do that, let's acknowledge this is a problem. And, you know, and I want to kick this to you, David, for a second, because I think that, you know, or I'm going to ask with regard to, you know, is it that sometimes, you know, do you feel like that, you know, maybe some white folks are scared to admit it? Is it just that, is it a comfort thing? Or does it go back to your point earlier that you can't fathom it, so maybe that's why certain moves haven't been made by certain people? What do you think about that?
Say the question again, because it was kind of a lot.
Yeah, I'll throw it a lot at you. Hey, listen, why don't some white folks stand up and say, yo, this is wrong? Why do you feel like that does not happen? We know that there's some that are standing out there and with us or whatever, but why are some folks not saying something?
You know, I think we live in a world where we just stop challenging things, and it goes back to what everybody was saying, like, this is just accepted, right? Like, and I think we get to a point where we're fed so much information that it's hard to process. Like for me, like, I can't even fathom all of that. And like, you know, you have, you know, the compassion that goes out.
Right.
I'm right there with all of you guys, clearly, while we're having this conversation, or with my friends. I think it's just the not knowing and not having the courage to have these kind of questions, to sit and listen, right? And we went through, you know, the George Floyd case, and you didn't hear like a lot from the community perspective on like what everybody was doing. And our church actually did like an open forum where they opened it up. They had African-American people come and sit on stage, and they talked about how they were feeling. And it was more of, in my backyard, how it's affecting my community, and not just so much on like this whole like social media tit for tat, like all race baiting, all these things. And it always turns into politics. You know what I mean? I think we've just conditioned these conversations to be an I got you. And I just think the conversations are really hard.
Right.
But you also have to be open to it. You know what I mean? Like, I've been volunteering at the men's shelter that's predominantly African-American for the last like 4 years now. You know what I mean? So I've had those conversations with the guys, and me being white, I wasn't accepted for like the first, I don't know, 4 months that I went there. And I would talk to the guy. You know, there's a certain level of respect that I had, and I go with good intentions, but you know, they see white people coming down, and you have these parents that bring their kids and are like, if you don't listen, you're going to end up like these guys. And it was just a social experiment. You know what I mean? So it lost the validity of actually doing the right thing. Right. And I don't know, my life has just led me to a lot of different perspectives, and like being the only white person and just having that respect and going in with good intentions. Like, Like you said, like I have a big heart because I care, and I teach my kids that. My wife is that. Like that's the values of in our home. So I just think it's not a simple like answer, because it just depends on your upbringing. I mean, my family is very country. Like I was born in the sticks. Like my first public
Not
school.
the sticks. Come on, David, in the sticks.
Yeah, I was in the sticks. So my first year, so I went to Catholic school up until 6th grade. My high school that I went to, my first year in public school before we moved, I was only there 1 year. Our initials were concrete kids. There was no black people, right? So that was like a real thing. And I remember being on the football team with all of my friends and then having them say all the racism and like watching these poor kids break down and cry. Like that just like tore me apart on the inside.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I just think I've always had friends that made me aware. So like I have the empathy and the sympathy and the understanding, but like I'll never fully understand.
And as we're looking towards, just making a shift, guys, and just at this point, I just want you to jump in as we kind of wrap up, because we obviously we can go for hours, and it's gonna get, some things might get turned up a little bit. Yesterday, Biden announced who his, with regard to, I got to make sure I correctly because I saw this on, so Kamala Harris, because it's not Kamala, it's
Kamala.
Kamala.
Dang, I thought I had it right. Hold on, Fred. We know you know, Fred. What is it?
Kamala Harris.
Kamala. Okay. So, and so that's it, within 24, 48 hours, you just see stuff just flying all over. And it's like, really? So, if we just had to bring us towards, maybe what you as individuals are doing, just moving forward to move the movement, move beyond some of the ignorance, and just kind of prepare yourselves and your household or whatever. I mean, guys, just jump in. Like, just where do we go from here?
I think we all have a platform, right? I think it's just the intentionality, and I think there's a lot of emotion, and to keep moving it forward, I think more conversations like this need to be happened, where it's a lot more diverse, and people just need to be open and to have these conversations. And it's not so much to have an answer, but to listen on how it affects everybody. You know what I mean? Like from our kids' perspective, because I think that's where my heart goes, is like these kids come up in these torn, like it's just so much, and they're all connected. I mean, you look at these kids, they all have iPads, they're on YouTube, like you're seeing all of these things coming up, and if those parents are filtering out, how that's affecting that.
Right.
Well said.
Right. Anybody else?
I've got a 60-year-old white neighbor who's a very nice gentleman. And
Right.
and anyway, this past weekend, he, I mean, we actually talk a lot, and I'm very fortunate to have good neighbors, and all of us talk a lot and communicate. Anyway, he approached me about the book. He was like, Fred, I just read this fascinating book called White Fragility. He's like, he's like, I just have some questions I want to talk to you about. He's like, would you be interested in, I could tell there was like a little bit of discomfort.
Yeah, that's awesome.
in him, like, I was like, sure. I was like, yeah, yeah, sure. And he asked me how one of my other neighbors, who is African-American, he said, do you think that she would like that too? I was like, oh yeah, she's cool. Yeah, we'll definitely, let's talk about that. Let's have that conversation. Let's talk about, because he is more of a, because he's kind of, his politics are progressive, but that book challenges that, challenges the notion of that, and that's.
Wait. So say that one. Say what is it?
He's progressive, because some
Fragility.
people. Yeah, white fragility. And he's progressive, but being progressive, is not, if you're not challenging systems, because that's what racism is.
Right.
It's not just, we think of, like, classically, we think of racist as somebody who like overtly mistreats a person of a different race, color, ethnicity, whatever. But racism is, those are the systems that are in place that allow these things to persist. And if you are a beneficiary of that system, then you are participating in racist. And if you're not aware of that, then you're probably racist and you don't realize it. So like so the conversations, I think, it go from the old school overt behavior. Obviously, people don't you know, people in the South have been traditionally nice. Even if they're racist, they'll give you a sweet tea and say, bless your heart. We're having conversations about the systems that allow discrimination to persist and all of that. We're having more pointed, more focused conversations.
Listen, if I offended, it doesn't matter by laughing, because sometimes some of these things in the South, like I'm still getting used to the sweet tea thing. Like that's still, everybody got tea with a little cognac in it in the South. But people always say I more like people in the South because they call you a nigga to your face. You know what I'm saying? And anybody up north is gonna put something over that. So the way you just said that, Fred, that was one of the things that just popped in my head, because I'm like,
Bless your heart.
So Kevin, anything?
So to expand on what Cammie and Kevin had gotten into, because I think it was very powerful what they were sharing. We tend to romanticize our prior heroes as doing it in a nice and peaceful way, and I call bullshit on that, because peaceful is not going out knowing you're gonna get beat within an inch of your life and having dogs sick on you in water. That's not peaceful. It's peaceful for who? So I would agree with Fred that the old playbook needs to be changed. I think and unfortunately we've stuck in the mud relative to our mindsets on how we approach these things. We have Reverend Al Sharpton, we have Kevin Jackson, and others that are willing to jump up and consistently push the old playbook and allow these things to continue to happen until 2020. Something needs to change, and the problem is, somebody had positioned this, and forgive me, I'm forgetting who said it, is that somebody came out and asked them what to do, right? As our kids are coming and talking to us about what to do, imagine when they're in college and they're asking you that question, what to do. And the challenge for myself was understanding there are certain things I didn't know when we had to have that conversation. So as an example, how many of us know how many seats are up for Senate coming up? How many for in the House of Representatives coming up? How closely are we aligned to the news that's happening on a consistent basis and where we have power in that space? Who would we talk to? Conversations like Fred's having with his neighbors. I have a neighbor that walked up to have that very awkward conversation. The whole time he was saying, as an African American, as the way he was using it, it was the first time you've heard African American before, and now you're using it. It's okay to say I'm black. Do you remember? An Afro-American. Come on, bro. Just say I'm black. I'm black.
You might as well say Negro.
Well, I mean, it's when you go and where I feel and empathize, because this is what's always is understanding where the other person's coming from. Because right now, folks that want to be allies are walking around on eggshells because they don't know who they're going to piss off and how. And I've seen it happen. Somebody with well-intentioned wanting to be an ally, and we crap all over them because the situation is raw, unfortunately. So when the kids are asking us, what do I do? Make sure your ass is voting if you're old enough to do it. Make sure you as a parent hold the responsibility of understanding how to research what's happening, what's coming up, so that we do know how many 35 seats in the Senate are coming up, all of the House of Representatives seats are coming up, and who the hell you're voting for, so that you don't end up in the booth with a nice catchy name and you're voting for them that way. And not just voting down one particular damn ticket. Get over yourselves on that. If you're voting all Democrat, believe me, you're gonna end up back in the same situation. If you're voting all Republican, same thing. Be educated around what's going on in our area and how we can change it. And as parents, we're responsible to say that to our kids. And if you're not, you're failing your children. I promise you're failing your children.
Listen, guys. No, what you say?
No, I'm saying, so that's what you do. And by the way, label the damn KKK as a domestic terrorism organization. We're going to do it to Black Lives Matter. I'm sorry. That's all I have to say.
Listen, we can. And first of all, I something that Fred said maybe about a couple of minutes ago with regard to, breaking barriers and things of that nature. And so strategically, I have each one of you on the line because inside of yourselves, you've broken different barriers. And listen, y'all, look, we got two Kevins, y'all. Y'all see that? Kevin, you're on two different. We got you. Listen, we just gonna leave it there. It don't matter. But each one of you have broken barriers in different areas, and so I wanted to just really come on board tonight and just kind of get a sense of how you feel as individuals that, are within my inner circle. And I appreciate the information that each one of you had to share. So, as we're going, and if you just had to give maybe a 1-minute elevator version, if you had to speak to, how to help to give somebody just a piece of hope or help, or how you walk through what you did, this experience inside of the Black Lives Matter movement. If you just had to give a piece of advice to any of the young men that are out there, that would, what would that be?
I'll go because I've been fighting internet issues the entire time. So I just decided to switch over to my cell phone. What's crazy is in the midst of going through that internet trauma, I came up with an acronym, and that acronym is PURE, right? That's where I think I'm going to lead from here on out. And number one, it starts with protection. Obviously with all the events that are happening in this day and age, I think, whatever's going to happen this November, we need to learn how to better protect ourselves. If you do have Black men that go in droves and, protect themselves, protect their families by purchasing firearms, right, with the right intention to protect their family, I think that, we can look at some change with the gun laws. We can look at, I think that will raise some eyebrows of why exactly are they doing this. So I think protection is number one. Number two is unity, right? I think that we can all understand each other a lot better. When you ask David that question of his white counterparts, brothers and sisters, I think about what some of them are thinking, and a lot of them feel like, hey, I had to struggle too. They might not know what our struggle was about, but the guy who lives in Fred's neighborhood is like, I'm 60 years old and this 40-year-old Black guy on the news is my neighbor. What do you mean? He's not, there's nothing wrong with him and his people. I mean, he's fine, right? And Fred is just, he's a example of what goes right, but there's so many examples of what goes wrong. We've got where my PUR, reparations, right? We didn't discuss that at all, but there's a huge wealth gap, and a lot of people think that, why do we need that? That was so long ago. Well, I made a Facebook post not long ago saying that I knew my great-grandfather. His father lived on a slave plantation. So if I knew my great-grandfather and his father lived on a slave plantation, I mean, man, we're not really that far removed from that. And if you think all this free labor that we contributed over the last 400 years or 250 years, whatever way you want to break it down, is not to be compensated for, I think that right now, this particular day and age, we need to, this is our moment. This is the 10 minutes running down, 10 seconds running down on the clock where somebody needs to take the ball and run. And the E is education. On everyone's side, whether it be the Black, African-American, whether it be, white, whether it be Hispanic, Asian, whatever, we all need more education of what's going on in each other's communities. So I would say to anyone watching, to stay pure. Protection, unity, reparations, as well as education.
I have to write that down. Protection, unity. Okay, anybody else? While I take these notes, that was pretty good.
Hey, Elam, have you heard? Have you heard of redlining? You live in Atlanta, man.
Listen, dude, but I'm gonna keep it real. I heard portions of it, but I never heard that terminology used. So, folks can judge me. It's all good.
That was the E for education.
I'll send you something you gotta watch, Elam. It'll explain.
Oh man,
I'm just the one that admitted it. Okay.
I'm just messing with you, man. There's this story that's floating around about. If you recall the two white actresses that paid like $250,000 to get their kids into college. One was the girl from Full House, the mom from Full House, and the other one, I forget what show she was in.
Right.
They paid like six figures to get their daughters, I think, into college. And the penalty for that was like,
like a few months in jail.
If that, I think one of them
If-
spent like
yeah,
14
if
days
that.
or something like that.
It's in probation.
It
But then
was.
But then the mother who the mother who put her kid, who basically falsified her address to put her kid in a good public school because of where she lived. She wanted to put her kid in a good public school that was not in her district. How much time did it take, Cammy?
5 years.
5 years in jail.
5 years for using her somebody's address that she knows. And they spent hundreds of thousands keeping another qualified student from getting in, and literally got 10 minutes or whatever as a sentence, and stuff like that, man. It just makes my blood boil, dude. I try. I know I laugh a lot, but sometimes, man, if I really let it out, I am furious about the stuff that goes on in this world. I'm like,
you wasn't supposed to hold it in, man. Do a
Let
part
it
two.
out. Go ahead and let it out.
Cammy, we're gonna let it. Cammy's gonna bring us a part two, y'all.
Flip a table.
Dang, Cammy, that was my bad.
there you go, Cecil. There you go, Cecil. I'm gonna take you to church, brother. No, listen, man. It's a lot. It's a lot. And like Tupac said, man, America eats its babies, man. It's a vicious world out there. And we only have so many years, bro. Like, you don't even know when your time is up. You know what I mean? Our life is like a vapor, and it's gone and it's over. And I don't know. I just feel like this is, like you said, I think somebody said this is our moment. It's our time. And every time I get around, you guys, and have these conversations and listen to all that, I mean, come on, Pure. Like, I don't want to follow Pure, and I hear these things, man, and I'm just like, I'm jacked up, man. Like, let me play, because I don't know when my season's gonna end. Let me get on the field. Let me make something happen. Let me make a mess, and we'll clean it up later. You know what I mean? Just do something. That's how I feel. And that's it. Cam out.
So we got Martin, Kevin Gray, and we got Malcolm, Cammy. No. I bring humor to certain things, but that's actually real, Cammy. I'm glad that you actually expressed that, because that is in the hearts of some people. I want that level of expression to come out. So no censorship on you. You know that, Bobby.
Appreciate you, brother.
So I appreciate you sharing that. Fred, David, any closing words? Cecil, did you go? Cecil, did you win? I think Cecil.
Not yet. But I'm
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
We ready.
Do it up.
The big thing I'll take away. So your question, Elam, was how do we move forward?
Yeah, I mean, just with regard to just a sense of advice for individuals out there that might be feeling like Cammy, how he just his level of expression, that there's something inside that he's feeling.
Yep.
Just a piece of just a nugget of advice for how to channel that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we need, one, is understand the power that we truly do have. The news, not news relative to media. I think the news amongst us, our families, et cetera, makes you think that you can't enact change, right? Because we're not in the rooms in certain places. But if you truly know the power of things that you as an American citizen can do to enact change, it becomes very, very, it's like a small world at that point. So you got to really understand how you can enact change in the United States and actually follow through on that. Twitter warriors and Facebook likes or hates or all that stuff don't mean a damn thing if you ain't getting out and voting, understanding what you're voting for, understanding how you get engaged with people that are running, and not allowing corrupt people to help run our country like we are today in many instances, and sadly on both sides of the aisle. The thing that's helping me move forward, Elon, to answer your question directly, is I'm so proud of the new generation of kids that really good parents that are attentive and want to be good people have raised.
Right.
The colors of the rainbow that are representative of a plight of individuals currently, and recognizing that the system needs to be fixed and it's just not fair, and they're not okay with that. To see that has been heartwarming for me. That helps me to move forward and continue to fight in the way that I am. And the other thing I'll say, Elon, I'll challenge all of us to do, because we do this a lot, is we got to stop putting people in buckets, right?
Okay.
It's all white people X, all black people X, or trying to have us weigh in on situations when you all know there's black people that you like, that brother's crazy and he's off, or she's off. And it's the same thing in the white organization. In the white ethnic groups, it's the same thing in the other ethnic groups as well. We have to be mindful. The reason why I say that's important is because we have been crabs in a pot for so long that we don't recognize we have allies wanting to assist us. And that's a big piece of the plan that we always fail is we think that anybody trying to help us or assist us or be on our side because they've been raised right to know that fair is right. We generally tend to ostracize them with our BS. And we got to avoid that.
Okay.
That's important.
Yeah.
Okay. Cecil with -3. And so I don't know, Fred or David, if you have anything else or whatever, but I wanted to take
just really quickly to bounce off of what Cecil said. What I've said to people quietly, well, like just a couple of people who are really close to me, is that like the last thing that Cecil said is so important that and this is where the conversation needs to go actually in the new generational leadership. I think that we need to start having the conversation about how we are, about how we think, about how we process this, because it's the same thing when you are when you're in an abusive relationship and you break free from an abusive relationship. You have to change the way you think about things. You may have gotten by in survival mode, but you can't thrive in survival mode.
right.
And so that's kind of what Cecil hit on. You know, when you have allies who are here to help you, you have to realize, you have to see that for what it is. And in that, transform your thinking to take you to, you know, a different level, a different position than where our forefathers 40 years ago got us. You know, it's time to start having a different conversation about how we're managing ourselves and how we're thinking about things.
And that was really, Fred, was the crux of this conversation. I know we kind of veered in different directions, but it's really more of just uncovering, just acknowledging that those feelings exist, right? And then simultaneously working towards having, you know, a better path forward, whether it's pure, because Kevin, I'm gonna hit you back later on with the other. I got the R and the E, so I'm gonna hit you with the pure part. All right, that was pretty good. I'm gonna use that on stage. All right, may I? Use that one day.
You got to give me credit the first time, and then after that you can have this jump. But it's protection, unity, reparations, and education. That's my particular plan.
Yeah, and protection, unity, reparations, and education. And I think that speaks a lot. And again, I want to thank you guys for just coming on board tonight. This is just having a moment of touching on the conversation, because this is really not something that you can just even break down within, 30, 40 minutes or whatever case it be, 4, 5 conversations we can have. And, but it's just beginning the conversation of knowing that, hey, you might feel some type of way, and that, you need to also express how you feel about that. And then also, just prepare a path forward that's just, going to be more progressive for you and for your family. If you, just to wrap up, if you guys could just share, your 30-second elevated version and any closing remarks, and that's 30 seconds, not like no long-windedness, okay? Oh, man. So, Fred, who, let them know.
No, I just think just to reiterate, I think we have to go into our situations, our workplaces, and, our Zoom calls, or how we're socializing, with an open mind, ready to engage and ready to receive people, because we are in a very unique, like I say, honeymoon stage where people are receptive, and you have to be able to extend grace in this moment in order to move forward.
Absolutely. No, where can they find you, Fred? Where can they find you?
You can find me again at Fred WCNC on Twitter, The Real Fred Shropshire on Instagram, and Fred Shropshire WCNC on Facebook.
All right, cool beans. Kevin, where can they find you, man?
All right, I don't know if you said Kevin. I'll go since
Kevin, KGAY.
No doubt. You guys can find me at facebook.com/KDG23 or Instagram at Kevin Dream Gray. I pretty much just have to piggyback off of what everyone said tonight. I completely agree. To the young Fred, make sure that your hands are 10 and 2 or on top of the steering wheel. Let's make sure that we understand where other people are coming from. Let's not block our blessings. I think that was the point of one of Cecil's talking points. Let's not block our blessings by shielding, the people that would like to help us away. I know Cammie had a lot of Malcolm X moments, and we got to be angry about this, but at the same time, we got to be controlled. And like David said, David is someone that we can learn a lot from. So, once again,
Malcolm.
Hey, we got another name for you there, Cammie.
That's hilarious.
In this building. Hey, David, what's up, sir? Where can they find you, man?
Sure. So closing words, I would say just the open-mindedness on both sides and just not the stigmata, you know what I mean? We're only exposed to what we're exposed. And I think in these conversations of not that prejudgment that I'm just supposed to know, right? Like, coming from up north, moving south, it's two completely different worlds. You live in Jersey, like everything's just so diverse and it's just so far ahead of, where we are in the South. Like these conversations, I don't know if I would have had those in the same living up north, So I think it's just the open-mindedness on both and just actually listening to listen, not listening to answer and just assume,
Right.
You can find me at The Refined Gentleman on Instagram and on Facebook.
Ooh, Cecil, let them know, sir.
You can find me at Cecil, CECIL.Burrows, BURROWES1 on Instagram, Cecil Burrows on Facebook, and the Benedict Society on Instagram. Great conversation, great dialogue relative to our times. Learned a lot, learned some different perspectives on some different things, but it's never ending, gentlemen.
Right.
We got to be parents, but we got to be parents of the movement as well. To Fred's point, the old playbook is dying out. We need new playbooks, new approaches to make this thing truly work.
Right. And thank you again, gentlemen. We are going to have ongoing dialogue. We're gonna do a holiday version of the album. So we'll be back. But thank you again to everybody who follows on the Understanding a Man podcast. Of course, you can follow us on Elam B. King on Facebook, Elam B. King on Instagram as well. And we're available on Anchor under Understanding a Man, which is available on whether you have iTunes or Overcast or the other myriad of ones. You can definitely find us there. And thank you to all of our subscribers. And you can actually catch this video also on the YouTube Understanding a Man as well. Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to do we're going to do like the best man holiday version of this, like November. Hey, listen, they was quiet tonight, y'all. Everybody reserved. I know, Cam, you turned up for like 10 seconds, but you.
You're a mess, man. You are a mess.
Coming in.
But all right, so
Watch the news. All you local, support our boy, Fred Shropshire.
yeah, man. You know what I'm saying? That's for real. Is it 11 Alive, 6 p.m.?
Yeah. Coming in. Just like the fajita. I write what I live. My life in the speaker. Nice to the flow.
Hashtag blessed.
Just like the demeanor. Feeding my fans.